She wasn't supposed to win. She was supposed to disappear when her mother died, but she didn't. And years later, at her stepsister's billionaire engagement party, he looked at her like he remembered every word he never said. Welcome back to Mr. Charles' Stories. Tonight's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about quiet strength, about the girl they thought they could replace, about the man who remembered too late. If you've ever been treated like your silence meant weakness, this story is for you. Stay to the end for a message that just might change the way you see your own strength. And if you believe truth always outlasts performance, like, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Let's begin. The chandeliers in the Norinville estate were brighter than Isla remembered. The place had changed. The wooden floors had been replaced with marble. The warm, earthy tones her mother once picked were now all ice-white and silver. It looked like a catalogue now. Cold, expensive, empty. Isla stood near the back patio, holding a glass of something she hadn't touched. Everyone was dressed like they belonged in a magazine. Tailored suits, flawless gowns, camera-ready smiles. Terra Vell was the center of it all. Blonde, tall, glowing in a custom gown that shimmered under the light. Her laugh was trained, her pose practiced. Corvin Aldrich stood beside her. Billionaire, CEO, a man with enough power to buy countries and enough silence to keep the world guessing. But tonight, he looked distracted, distant, like none of this was his idea. Isla kept her distance. She wasn't invited to celebrate. She was invited to be seen, and then ignored. The servers moved around her like she was invisible. Terra's friends whispered when she passed. Alina didn't even bother to fake a smile anymore. But Isla hadn't come for their approval. She'd come because of the photo and the signature. 3 years ago, West Village, she had been walking out of a second-hand bookstore, her arms full of old poetry books she couldn't afford but had bought anyway. A man held the door open for her. She mumbled a thank you, barely looked up. But he looked at her and paused. Sorel's daughter, that voice, low, steady, the kind that didn't guess when it spoke. Isla had nodded, stunned. I was. He stared for a moment, then said softly, "She told me once your eyes don't lie." A beat. She was right. He offered her a car. She refused. He offered tea. She accepted. They barely spoke, but she remembered everything. The way he studied her without asking. The way he let silence be enough. The way he wrote inside the last book he bought her. You don't speak much, but you say everything. See, he never called. He never came back. Until his name showed up beside Terra's in the papers. Back at the party, Corvin glanced up and saw her. He froze mid-step. The crowd still moved, but he didn't. Terra tugged at his sleeve, whispering something with a soft smile. He didn't respond. His eyes stayed on Isla. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. But something between them locked, quiet and electric. And for a second, in a room full of applause and cameras, he looked like a man who had seen a ghost or a memory. Alina saw it too. From across the room, her jaw tightened. Later that night, Isla returned to the guest room. It used to be her mother's studio, filled with notebooks, fabrics, hand-drawn patterns, and softly burning candles that smelled like lavender. Now it was white walls, a guest bed, and a gold tray with Evian bottles. The only thing untouched was the old chest Isla had moved to the closet years ago. She opened it. Inside were carefully folded scarves, a velvet box, and a sealed envelope with her name written in handwriting she hadn't seen in years. She opened it with steady hands. Inside the envelope, a photo, a certificate, a note. The photo showed her mother, Cyril Norin, with Corvin Aldrich, smiling. His hand was on her lower back. A younger Isla, around 12, stood in the background. The certificate, an engagement license, unfiled, but signed, Corvin Aldrich, Cyril Norin. Dated 1 year before her mother's sudden fall down the stairs. Her throat closed. She blinked at the page. This wasn't random. This wasn't a missed connection. This was betrayal. And not just once, but twice, Alina had taken her mother's fiancé. And now, fed him to her daughter. There was a knock. Alina didn't wait to be invited in. She stepped in like she owned the air. "You looked stiff tonight," she said casually, walking to the mirror, adjusting her earring. Isla stayed seated on the bed, letter in her hand behind her back. Alina smoothed her dress, checked her reflection, and continued. "You could have had him, you know." No eye contact, just words dropped like acid. But you stayed small, obedient, silent. That's not what powerful men want. Isla stood slowly, calm. "No," she said, "but it's what they remember." Alina finally looked at her. There was something in Isla's gaze that unsettled her, but Alina covered it with a smirk and walked out. Isla stood alone. She picked up the photograph again. Her mother's eyes smiled from the frame. And for the first time in years, Isla whispered aloud, "I see it now." She couldn't sleep. She walked through the long glass hallway near the conservatory. Portraits of the family Alina built hung on the walls. Tara's graduation, the Vell family cruise, the step-siblings Isla never bonded with. She paused at one painting, Sorel's old favorite floral still life, now hidden behind a sculpture. And then she heard it, a low voice, male, soft, inside the conservatory. She stepped in. He stood alone, in a dark suit, staring at the garden. He turned. Corvin. His eyes held hers. No pretense, no protection, no press, just the truth. She stepped forward, stopped 3 feet from him, and held up the photo. His hand shook when he took it. He stared. The silence between them was heavy. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't ask," she said. His breath caught. He sat slowly, head in his hands. "She left," he said. "She was pushed," Isla replied. The weight of her voice cut deeper than any scream could. They said nothing else for a long time, until he looked up. "What do you want?" She didn't blink. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for revenge. She said only one word. Truth. The next morning, Isla left early. She didn't wait for breakfast. Didn't wait for anyone to ask why she was there. She walked past the staff, down the long driveway lined with roses her mother never planted, and called a cab from the gate. She needed space, time to breathe. The velvet box still sat inside her tote bag, hidden beneath a folded cardigan. Her fingers brushed the edge of it every few minutes, as if to remind herself that it was real, that what she had seen, the photograph, the engagement license, the date, the signatures, wasn't a dream or a cruel trick. Her mother had been engaged to Corvin Aldrich before she died. Before Alina moved in, before the house became a set for someone else's performance. She couldn't understand why Sorel never said anything, why she never told her daughter she'd been in love with a man the world would later recognize on magazine covers and Forbes rankings. But maybe that was exactly why. Because real love wasn't about showing, it was about keeping, protecting, and Sorel had protected hers until the end, and Isla had inherited it without even knowing. She arrived back at her apartment in the city and sat by the window for a long time. It was quiet here, the kind of quiet that wrapped around her instead of drowning her. No glass chandeliers, no hired chefs, no hallway portraits of people who called themselves family but had none of her blood. She made tea, sat on the rug, opened her mother's journal, and flipped to the page where the envelope had been tucked. A single sentence was written at the bottom in ink that had almost faded. "Keep your truth clean. They'll try to twist it." She didn't cry, but something inside her settled, because now she understood what she was meant to do. She wasn't going to destroy anyone. She wasn't going to fight Tara, or scream at Alina, or call the media. She was going to tell the truth, to the only person who deserved it, and let the rest fall apart on its own. That evening, she returned to the estate. No one expected her. Not the staff. Not Tara, not even Alina, who looked startled when Isla walked through the doors, in a soft navy coat and flat shoes, her hair tied back simply. "I thought you left," Alina said, blocking the hallway. I needed air. Alina folded her arms. And now, I'm here for a conversation. Not with you. Alina's jaw clenched, but she moved. Corvin was in the library. He turned when she entered, closing a folder slowly. They stared at each other for a moment before either of them spoke. Isla didn't sit. She walked to the small table near the fireplace and set the velvet box down gently. I opened it again, she said. He stepped closer. Can I see? She nodded. He opened the box, removed the engagement license, the photograph, and the note. His fingers lingered on the image of Serel. He looked younger in it, softer, a version of himself he probably hadn't seen in years. She wore green a lot, he murmured. Said it made her feel calm. She wore it the day she died, Isla said quietly. His gaze flicked up to hers. You think it wasn't an accident? I know it wasn't. She told him everything. The staircase, the sudden move in, the papers Alina had pushed her father to sign while he was still grieving, the way Serel's friends had been slowly shut out in the months before her death. Corvin listened without interrupting, and when she was finished, he didn't make promises or offer hollow sympathy. He said, she deserved better. Isla nodded. So do I. They stood in silence. Then he asked, why now? Why come back? Because you forgot her, Isla said. And she was the only person who ever knew who you really were. He stepped back slightly. That may be true, he admitted. But I didn't forget you. She looked up, stunned. The girl at the bookstore, he continued, with the poetry books and the eyes that didn't lie. I thought about you more than I should have. I didn't call because I didn't know how to explain who I was without it ruining what that moment was. And now? She asked. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a familiar book on the table between them, the one he bought her. Now, I want to start from that page again, he said. If you'll let me. She picked up the book, flipped to the last page. The handwriting hadn't faded. You don't speak much, but you say everything. See, I'm not the same girl, she whispered. And I'm not the same man, he replied. But maybe that's the point. She sat down then. And for the first time in 3 years, they shared a conversation that wasn't stolen in a bookstore or drowned by a party. It was quiet and steady, and more honest than anything she'd known since her mother passed. They didn't talk about love, not yet. But when he walked her to the door and placed a hand lightly on her back the way he once did with Serel, she didn't step away. And when he said, "Can I see you again?" she nodded. Once. But it was enough. Because this time, she wasn't going to be quiet for someone else's comfort. She was going to speak. She was going to live. And if Alina Vell thought she had written the final chapter, she hadn't read the last page. If this story touched you, pause for 1 second. Like this video if quiet strength speaks to you. Comment below if you have ever been replaced, overlooked, or underestimated. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for powerful stories where dignity always wins in the end. She didn't call him the next day. She didn't need to. Because that evening, as she left her office, she saw his car parked across the street. He didn't step out, didn't wave, but she knew he was there. And he knew she saw him. They were past games now. Past pretending it was coincidence. The past had returned, and neither of them wanted to outrun it anymore. That night, Isla opened the second half of her mother's journal. She had avoided those pages for years. The handwriting shifted halfway through, from steady lines to ones slightly shakier, thinner, almost as if Serel had started writing in a hurry. There were names, dates, short phrases. March 6th, he flew to Oslo. March 15th, Corvin's ring arrived. March 19th, Alina visited again. Stayed overnight, didn't knock. Then, the entry circled 3 times. April 2nd, engagement license. April 5th, told Isla. She smiled. April 10th, lost balance on stairs. Isla's chest tightened. It was no longer theory. Her mother hadn't just fallen. Something had changed between April 5th and April 10th. Something had shifted. Or someone. And she knew who. At the Aldrich building in Midtown, the top floor held Corvin's main office. Few ever stepped inside. Fewer still were invited to sit down. But Isla walked through the glass doors without a security badge. His assistant looked up and paused. She didn't ask why Isla was there. She simply said, "He's expecting you." Inside, the office was quiet. Polished. Neutral. It didn't feel like a billionaire's empire. It felt like a man who didn't decorate his life for others. Corvin stood near the window. He turned when she walked in, but said nothing. She held the journal out. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he asked, "Are you ready for what it might change?" She didn't blink. "I already changed." He nodded once. Took the book. He sat down, flipping pages slowly. He didn't speak for several minutes, but Isla watched his expression shift. Once, at a note about Tara's name being mentioned at the dinner, Cyril never attended. Again at the circled April dates. When he looked up, his face was unreadable. "Why didn't she come to me?" he asked quietly. "She probably thought you were already gone." "I wasn't." "Then maybe she didn't want to stop you." Later, they sat across from each other in a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the office. No reporters, no questions. Just soft music and empty plates between them. "I knew Alina back then," he said. "Not well. Enough to be polite. She never liked Cyril being with me. She liked what you could give." He nodded. "And she knew Cyril wasn't going to ask for it. That's why she tried to become her," Isla said softly. His jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. She continued, "It wasn't just about marrying my father. It was about erasing everything my mother built. Her home, her daughter, even her fiancé. You think she pushed Cyril?" "I think Cyril trusted the wrong person to visit that day. And I think no one questioned it because Alina had already started rewriting the story before the ink dried." He looked at her. "Long, you speak differently now. I was a child then." He gave a slight smile. "No, you just stopped holding it in." She looked down. He reached across the table. Lightly, not a full touch, just presence. "I owe her the truth," he said. "And you—" She didn't pull away. "I don't need your guilt," she said quietly. "I'm not offering guilt." "Then what are you offering?" He sat back. "The beginning we never had." Back at her apartment, Isla replayed those words in her head. Not because they sounded rehearsed, but because they didn't. He hadn't promised anything outrageous. He hadn't asked for forgiveness. He simply named what had always been left undone. And that, to her, meant more than all the apologies he could have given. She pulled out a folder from under her bed, one she'd kept sealed for 5 years. Inside were newspaper clippings, old photos, a printout of her mother's obituary with handwritten notes in the margin, legal paperwork that Alina had never expected Isla to understand at 17. But she had understood. She just hadn't been ready to fight back. Until now. She circled one line: will contested, signature delayed, property transferred to Alina Vell via joint marital claim. It wasn't legal, not entirely, not if Isla could prove her mother had a separate living will, one that hadn't been filed before her death. She remembered something else from the journal, a line she had dismissed when she was younger. Lockbox key, silver chain, behind frame. Isla walked to the only photo she'd kept from the house. Her mother and her, laughing beside a river. She turned the frame over. Taped to the back, nearly faded with time, was a key. Small. Silver. Unmarked. And Isla's hand didn't tremble when she pulled it free. Because now she wasn't chasing revenge. She was reclaiming truth. Alina's voice rang over the estate speakerphone the next day, sharp and clear. "I want her gone before Friday. She's digging. And Corvin is paying attention." Tara's sigh followed. "I'm the one who looks humiliated. She doesn't even wear makeup, and people are noticing her. Then control the narrative. Post something. Tell them you called it off. Say he was emotionally unavailable. I'm not the problem, Mom. No. But you're supposed to be the solution. Silence. Then a click. The line dropped. But Isla had already recorded everything. Not for court. Not for blackmail. Just for memory. Because it proved what she already knew. Tara wasn't evil. She was groomed. Alina, though? She was calculated. And some stories didn't need revenge to bring justice. They just needed to be told out loud. The bank manager didn't ask too many questions. She looked at the old key, paused, then nodded politely and disappeared into the back with a clipboard. Isla waited, clutching her purse tighter than usual. It had been years since she'd even thought of this place, but something inside her had always remembered. The hallway scent, the faint lemon polish on the tile, the hum of printers in the distance. Cyril had brought her here once when she was a teenager. Said it was just in case. Isla thought she meant insurance papers. She had no idea her mother meant this. A grey box was placed in front of her. "Take your time," the woman said, and left her alone. Isla pulled it forward, heart quiet but firm. Inside, a sealed white envelope, a stack of photos, and one USB drive tucked into a small metal tin. She opened the envelope first. It was Cyril's handwriting. Again. Not faded this time. Clear. Pressed deep into the paper. "If you're reading this, someone tried to erase me. They'll twist everything. But you'll know the truth when you see it. And when you do, don't fight them with noise. Let the truth speak where I couldn't." There was a second document underneath, a notarized will. One that clearly left her business, the house, and all personal items solely to Isla Norrin. Signed and dated. 1 week before Cyril's death. This had never been filed. It had been hidden. She stared at it in disbelief. No one had told her this existed. Not her father. Not the lawyers. Not Alina. Especially not Alina. Isla opened the photo stack next. They were simple. Soft. Her mother in her workroom. Her mother holding Ela as a baby. Her mother and Corvin, laughing at ease, dressed in clothes that didn't match the curated image people had later tried to paste over them. And then, at the bottom, a photo Isla had never seen. Cyril and Alina, younger, close. But in this photo, Cyril looked tense. And Alina? Alina wasn't smiling. She was staring straight into the lens, possessive, like she wanted something already in Cyril's hand. Isla closed the lid slowly. She knew what this was now. Not just proof. It was the quiet weapon her mother had left behind. Not to destroy, to restore. To remind Isla that she hadn't imagined what was real. And she had every right to speak now. Later that night, Isla met Corvin at a quiet rooftop lounge overlooking the East River. He stood as she approached, no guards in sight. No advisors, no interruptions. She handed him the sealed will. He read it once, then again, then met her eyes. She knew this might happen, he said. She knew Alina. He handed it back carefully. "Are you going to take them to court?" "No." He waited. "I don't need their apology," she said. "I just want to take back what was already mine." His gaze softened. "And after that?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out at the city below. Lights flickered like quiet little truths. Millions of them, burning without needing permission. "I want peace," she said. "The kind that doesn't make me shrink. You won't have to." She turned to him. "Not with me," he added. She didn't smile, but her hand rested near his on the table, close enough that he could feel her answer. Meanwhile, at the Norrinville estate, Alina was pacing. She had seen the alert. An anonymous email with the subject line, "You missed a will." Attached, a photo of the signed document and a scanned image of Cyril's letter. Her fingers trembled, but not from guilt. From fury. She had done too much. Come too far. Married Isla's father when he was still in mourning. Taken over the house. Burned every bridge that connected Cyril to the outside. And now, this. She called Tara. Tara didn't answer. She tried again. Voicemail. She hurled her phone across the couch and grabbed a glass of wine with shaking hands. In her mind, Isla was still the girl who didn't speak. Still the quiet, obedient one who let herself be overlooked. But something had changed, and Alina knew it. She poured another drink, and for the first time felt something she hadn't felt in years. Panic. Tara, meanwhile, was on the phone with a PR agency. Her tone was clipped. "I want the statement softened. Make it sound mutual. No mention of Isla, no timelines. If anyone asks, the engagement ended last month." The woman on the other end hesitated. "Miss Vell." The Aldrich Foundation already posted a statement. They confirmed the separation. "And they didn't mention your name." Tara froze. "It went up 20 minutes ago." The comments are supportive, but neutral. Tara ended the call without another word. She opened the post. There it was. Aldrich Foundation official. Mr. Corvin Aldrich and Miss Tara Vell are no longer engaged. We wish Miss Vell the very best in her future endeavors. At this time, Mr. Aldrich will be taking personal leave to focus on philanthropic matters and internal transitions. No photos, no drama, just clean distance. And the final sentence, that was the one that hit her the hardest. At home, Isla scrolled through the same post on her phone. She read it once, then put her phone down, and didn't react. She simply walked into her small kitchen, made a cup of tea, and stood by the window. Outside, the world kept moving. But inside, something was different. Not loud, not triumphant, just honest. The truth had spoken. And for now, that was enough. Corvin didn't speak to the press. He didn't grant interviews or stage public moments. But when his office released the statement, the message was clear. He had closed one door. And everyone who knew how to read between lines understood that something, or someone, else now held his attention. Isla didn't text him, didn't follow up. She didn't need reassurance that the post was about her. She had already lived through what performance looked like. She didn't need a spotlight to confirm the truth. But when he showed up at her office with coffee, no security, and a soft expression that didn't need words, she let him in. The receptionist whispered his name like a rumor. Isla led him to a corner conference room. They sat across from each other in the quiet. "You didn't have to come," she said, sipping. "I didn't want to stay where I was." She looked at him carefully. "Why?" He leaned back in the chair, turning the coffee cup slowly. "Because I've made a lot of moves in my life based on strategy," he said, "but I've only ever regretted the ones where I ignored what I felt." "And what do you feel now?" He didn't blink. "I feel like I lost something once." "And now?" He looked at her. "I want to know what happens when I don't walk away." Later that day, Isla took the train to the estate. She hadn't planned to, but something inside her told her it was time. Her father wasn't home. Tara was in the city, probably nursing the blow of a public separation behind new lashes and curated captions. But Alina was there, standing in the main hallway in a silk robe, a glass of something golden in hand. "You're bolder now," she said, without turning around. Isla stepped inside, closing the door gently. "I'm the same." "No, you're not." Alina turned then, but her usual smirk was missing. Something more dangerous sat behind her expression, quiet tension. A woman used to winning, who suddenly realized her opponent had always been holding the final piece. "You went to the lockbox," Alina said. "I did. And my mother left a will." Alina nodded. "Unfiled. Legally debatable." Isla pulled a folder from her bag, placed it on the marble table between them. Legally notarized, witnessed, unchallenged for over 5 years, and discovered under questionable suppression. Alina didn't touch it. Instead, she said, "You don't have the money to fight me. I don't need to fight you." "Then what are you doing here?" Isla stepped closer. "I'm here to tell you I'm not afraid of you anymore." Alina blinked. That rattled her more than any legal document. Corvin watched the evening skyline from the balcony of his penthouse. He hadn't brought anyone up here in years. Not since Cyril. He remembered her standing exactly where he was now, barefoot, hair tied back, quiet in the way he never knew he needed. She had never asked for anything, never demanded declarations or headlines, but she had left an impression on him that nothing had ever erased. Not even time. Not even guilt. And now her daughter carried that same quiet, but stronger, clearer, more unwilling to bend. The door behind him opened. He turned. Isla stepped into the room, wind lifting her coat slightly. "You didn't lock the elevator," she said. "I wanted you to find me." She stepped out to the balcony. The city below was glowing. They stood side by side. Then he said, "I loved her." She didn't respond. He continued, "But I didn't stay. I left for business. Told her I'd be back in a month." Alina came in that gap, filled the space. Isla looked at him. "She never blamed you. She should have. No. She just knew what it cost her." He turned. "What about you? What about me? What did it cost you to come back here?" She paused. Then, "Everything I used to think made me weak." The next morning, Alina met with her lawyer. She pushed the folder across the desk. "Tell me how to kill this clean." The man opened the file, flipped through the will, scanned the timestamps and leaned back. "You don't," he said. She sat straighter. "I can challenge it," she insisted. "You can delay it, you can muddy it, but it'll look like what it is, a cover-up." She gripped the edge of the desk. She was supposed to be the footnote. He tilted his head. "Then you underestimated the author." That evening, Tara posted a photo of herself on a yacht. The caption read, "Some endings are blessings." But the comments weren't what she expected. He upgraded in silence. "Your mom must be furious right now." She never needed to say a word to win. Tara locked her phone, and for the first time, cried alone. Not because of Corvin, but because somewhere deep inside, she knew Isla had never tried to take anything, and still ended up with everything. The next time Isla and Corvin met, it wasn't at his office, or a dinner table, or a rooftop. It was at her mother's gravesite. She hadn't planned to bring him, but when he showed up outside her building, with a coffee in one hand, a small bouquet of white peonies in the other, she didn't turn him away. They drove in silence. The cemetery was tucked against a hill an hour outside the city. No paparazzi, no noise, just breeze and stone, and the kind of quiet you don't get in Manhattan. Cyril's headstone was simple, no titles, no etched roses, no mention of anyone but her name, birth, and passing date. But Isla remembered how her mother always said, "What matters is what I leave in people, not what they carve above me." Isla knelt to clear away a few fallen petals. Corvin stood back, hands in his coat pockets, saying nothing. When she stood, she didn't look at him. She whispered, "She loved you." He swallowed hard. "I loved her back." Isla turned then. "Why didn't you fight harder?" "I thought I had time." She didn't respond. He added, "She told me once, when you leave, leave clean. Or don't leave at all." I didn't understand what she meant until I walked away and everything got muddy. Isla looked at him. "You understand? I'm still learning." She studied him for a long time. "You left her," she said. "Yes, but I don't think you ever left the part of you that she brought to life." He exhaled, and for a second she saw the man her mother had once trusted. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just the man who got tired of performing. They stopped at a small diner on the way back. No cameras, no reservation. They sat across from each other in a booth by the window, both nursing hot drinks and exhaustion. "You know," Isla said, stirring her tea, "people think silence means you don't feel." He looked up. "But it's the opposite," she continued. "Some of us stay silent because we feel too much." He nodded. She added, "When I saw you with Tara that day, I didn't feel angry." "What did you feel?" "Sad." He didn't ask why. She told him anyway. "Because it reminded me how easy it is for someone to forget who saw them first." His jaw tightened. "I didn't forget." She looked at him. "I walked away from that bookstore and told myself I'd imagined it. That you were just being kind, that maybe my mother had seen something in you that didn't exist anymore. And now," she took a slow sip of her tea, "I think that version of you still exists, but I don't need him to be perfect, just honest." Later that night, she sent him a voice message. She rarely did, but something needed to be said, on her terms. You once wrote that I didn't speak much but said everything. Maybe that was true, but I'm learning to say what matters now. You don't have to fix the past. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking that if you stay without needing to prove anything to the world. Stay as the man who looked at me like he remembered something worth returning to. He didn't respond that night. But the next morning, her doorbell rang. A single book on her doorstep, one of her mother's favorites. Inside the cover, a note. I'm not trying to rewrite history, just hoping to finally live in it with you. See, across the city, Alina called in a favor. She had one left. A quiet lawyer in Long Island who owed her from years ago. I want the will buried, she said flatly. But the man on the other line was silent for too long. Are you still there? I am. But Alina, this one isn't going away. Then, stall. I can try. But if the board finds out, your stepdaughter could file civil action, reputation damage, fraud. Alina's voice dropped. She doesn't want money. She wants legacy. I can control that. I don't think you can. Click. She tossed the phone across her desk. Legacy. That word haunted her more than money ever did. Because Cyril had built one. Quietly, humbly, without shouting. And Isla? She was becoming it. Without asking for anyone's approval. At her non-profit office, Isla stood in front of her team. She wasn't speaking about her mother, or Corvin, or Alina. She was pitching a new program, one for young girls who had lost mothers, who were raised by second wives, or handed over to systems that didn't ask if they were ready. Her voice didn't shake, not once. Afterward, one of her interns, barely 20, quiet, always watching, walked up and said, "You speak like someone who earned every word." Isla smiled, and for the first time in years, she felt that truth in her chest. Solid, calm, real, not loud, but unforgettable. By the end of the week, Isla received a letter, not from Alina, not from Tara, not even from her father. It was from a private law firm representing the Norrin estate. The language was polite, controlled, almost detached. But the message was clear. They were requesting a formal discussion regarding the recently discovered will, her mother's original wishes, and its potential implications on property and financial holdings currently under Alina Vell's name. Isla folded the letter once, slipped it into her drawer. She knew what it meant. They weren't surrendering. They were circling. She picked up her phone. Corvin answered on the first ring. "They're coming," she said. His voice was calm. "Let them." Alina didn't sleep the night before the meeting. She stared at the ceiling of her luxury bedroom, surrounded by a curated life that had started to feel less stable every week. The walls echoed in silence now. Her husband no longer asked about her schedule. Tara had gone cold. Her social network, the wives, the women who praised her taste and envied her reach, had stopped inviting her to private dinners. It wasn't just because Corvin had pulled away. It was because Isla had returned, and she had returned different. Alina could feel it in the way the staff paused when Isla walked in now. Not like she was a ghost, but like she owned something they hadn't noticed before. Presence. The kind of presence that didn't need noise to be recognized. And that made her dangerous, because presence was power. And Alina had built her entire life by pretending to be the loudest woman in every room. At the meeting, Isla walked in alone. No lawyer, no folder, no notes. Just her. Alina was already seated at the long glass table, flanked by two lawyers, both men in crisp charcoal suits. The air was cool. Alina didn't stand. Isla didn't expect her to. "Miss Norrin," one of the lawyers began, "we understand there's been some confusion about the original distribution of Cyril Norrin's estate." "There's no confusion," Isla said. She reached into her bag, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the table. "My mother's signed, notarized will, along with proof of suppression," they read in silence. Alina's fingers tapped against the base of her wineglass. "Legally, this doesn't have to become a war," the second lawyer said. "There are private resolution options." "I'm not looking for war," Isla replied. "I'm looking for truth." She met Alina's eyes. and I'm willing to speak it, publicly. If you force me to. Alina said nothing. The lawyer cleared his throat. We'd like to propose a reallocation of assets, a compromise that honors both timelines. No, Isla interrupted. Then, softer, you don't get to honor my mother's legacy by dividing it. She wasn't shared. Her voice wasn't partial, and her daughter won't be either. Alina's jaw locked. You think you've won something. Isla stood. I didn't come here to win. I came to remind you who Cyril Norrin was. And then, before anyone could respond, she walked out. At a quiet restaurant later that evening, Isla sat across from Corvin, sipping ginger tea. She didn't want wine. She didn't want to celebrate. She just wanted stillness. I didn't threaten them, she said. I know. I didn't raise my voice. You didn't have to. He reached across the table and gently tapped his finger against her palm. They heard you. She looked up. They didn't apologize. They won't. She nodded. But I think they'll back down. He tilted his head. Does that feel like a victory? She thought for a moment. No. It feels like a door closing. The right one. Corvin smiled faintly. And that's why you win. Back at the Norrinville estate, Alina stood at her mirror. The same mirror she had once used to practice her smile before photos. The one she had used to perfect the angles that sold her as composed, graceful, and untouchable. She looked at herself now. Her face hadn't changed much. But something else had. She looked tired. And not from age, from exposure. Because when real power walks into a room quietly, it doesn't need to explain itself. And Alina finally understood. Cyril had never needed to fight, because she had built a daughter who would do it for her without raising her voice. That was the legacy she could never rewrite. The sun was already low when Isla returned to the bookstore. The same one where it had all started years ago, where she'd bumped into Corvin. For the first time with her arms full of poetry books she couldn't afford. Back then, she hadn't even looked him in the eye. Now she walked in like it belonged to her story. She wasn't looking for anything. She just wanted quiet. The kind that smelled like old pages and dust, and years of people passing through without needing to explain why they were there. She walked to the same shelf, the one where he had pulled the book from, the one where he had left the note. It was still there, different edition. Same spine. She ran her fingers over the edge, remembering. He had written one sentence that had never left her. You don't speak much, but you say everything. At the time, she didn't think he meant it. But now, she believed he did, because silence had always been her language, until life forced her to speak. Corvin was waiting for her outside. He leaned against the car, tie loosened, coat open, his expression softer than usual. She smiled when she saw him. You always know where to find me. I never stopped paying attention. She stepped closer, resting her hand lightly on his forearm. They're backing off, she said. He nodded. Good. No apology, no press, just a quiet retreat. That's how cowards leave when they realize they've lost. She looked up at him. Do you think I'm done? With what? Fighting, speaking, proving. He studied her for a long moment. No, he said. But I think now you'll only speak when it matters to you. Not because someone pushed you into silence first. She exhaled. That felt right. I need time, she said. I'll wait. You don't even know what I'm asking for. Yes, I do. He reached for her hand. You're asking me not to expect you to be the woman I met in a moment. You're asking me to see you as the woman who chose not to disappear, even when they tried to replace you. She nodded, and he added, I'm not going anywhere. Across town, Tara scrolled through her feed. Every headline now mentioned her name, followed by former fiancé. The internet had moved on, but she hadn't. Not because she missed Corvin. She never knew him. Not really. She missed the idea of being chosen first, the idea of winning. But she knew, deep down, she had never earned that spot. Alina had handed it to her like a role in a script, and now the curtain had dropped. There was no one clapping. And Isla had never wanted the stage, but now, somehow, she held the final word. Back at Ila's apartment, she lit a candle. It smelled like lavender, the same kind her mother used to burn when she was designing late into the night. She hadn't lit it in years, not since the funeral, not since the silence became too heavy to carry. But now, it felt different. Now, she wasn't carrying the silence, she was choosing it. She picked up the old envelope again, the one that had held the photo, the certificate, the truth. Inside was a second note. She had missed it the first time. It was smaller, tucked behind the flap. Her mother's handwriting again. You'll know who to trust when they stop asking you to explain why you matter. She read it twice. Then, once more. It wasn't advice. It was a map. To herself. That weekend, Corvin asked her to go with him to his cabin. Just for the day. No pressure. No talk of the past. No expectations. She said yes. The ride was quiet. The cabin was hidden behind rows of tall pines, the kind of place designed for thinking more than talking. Inside, it smelled like cedar and old leather and something nostalgic. She sat on the porch with tea while he made food. He didn't ask questions. He didn't hover. He just let her exist. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to hold her shoulders so tight. She rested back, looked out at the trees, and whispered, mostly to herself, "I feel like I'm finally breathing." He didn't reply. He just stepped outside, set a plate beside her, and sat down quietly. Sometimes the loudest answer is presence. That night, when he dropped her off at her apartment, he didn't follow her in. He didn't reach for her. He just stood still, waiting. She unlocked the door, then turned. "I'm not done building. I'm not asking you to be. I want to grow slow, not perform fast. I'm here for slow." She stared at him for a moment longer, then nodded. "I'll call you tomorrow. I'll be where I've always been." And when she closed the door behind her, she didn't feel like she had to lock it to keep peace inside. She felt like peace had already walked her home. The wind outside her window carried the scent of early spring, that soft in-between season where winter had let go, but warmth hadn't fully arrived. Isla stood by the window holding the same book Corvin had given her years ago, the one with the note. She turned to the back page again. "You don't speak much, but you say everything. See." It used to feel like a compliment. Now it felt like a dare. What would she say now, if she stopped holding back? She ran her finger over the words, closed the book gently, and placed it on the table beside her laptop. A soft stack of unopened mail sat near it, and on top, a white envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo, a recent one, Alina, standing with 2 real estate agents, in front of the Norrin home. A sticky note was attached. "Legacy only survives if it's protected." Isla didn't panic. She simply changed clothes, picked up her phone, and walked out the door. At the county records office, she pulled Cyril's old deed from her folder. The woman at the desk looked surprised. "Most people don't come in person for this." "I'm not most people." The woman smiled. "Well, this says your mother was the sole owner prior to her death. Her will, once confirmed and validated, overrides any secondary claims on the property, so long as you act before permanent transfer is finalized." Isla leaned forward. "How long?" "You've got 72 hours before they register the listing legally." Isla nodded. She didn't need 3 days. She needed one. Corvin met her outside the office. He had already seen the photo. She didn't have to explain. "She wants to erase her." He nodded once. "Then don't let her." "I'm not just trying to keep the house. I'm trying to keep what was built inside it." "I know." "Then help me." He didn't ask how. He only asked, "Where do we start?" They started at the bookstore, not because it held the answer, but because it had always held the beginning. She stood between the shelves, tracing her steps. The owner, a quiet woman named Lida who had been there since Isla was a teenager, recognized her immediately. "I remember you," she said. Isla smiled softly. "I came here a lot after my mom passed. You used to sit in the poetry section with your arms full of books you didn't buy. I bought what I could." "I remember," Leader paused. You're the reason he used to come in. Isla blinked. Who? The man who always asked if we had any new ones she'd like. He never left his name. But he always bought something and left it on hold, said if you showed up, to hand it over. She reached under the counter, pulled out a thin brown envelope. I kept the last one. Isla opened it. Inside was a book. Thin, old, no inscription inside, but tucked in the back, another note, in the same handwriting. You didn't need to stay loud to be remembered, but I stayed quiet because I hoped you'd speak first. I'm ready to listen now. Isla stared at the paper for a long time. Leader said nothing. Some things don't need commentary. Isla folded the note gently and placed it in her coat pocket. Outside, Corvin waited. She didn't speak right away, but she reached for his hand. And this time, she held on. That evening, Isla stood in front of the Norrin home. The porch light flickered like it hadn't been changed in months. The shutters were new, Alina's style, too modern, too sharp, but the front steps still creaked the way they used to when Cyril walked them barefoot in the mornings with coffee and a notebook. The gate was open. She didn't knock. The house wasn't for sale. Not yet, but it was listed. Quietly, privately, like a secret. Alina didn't want Isla to see until it was too late. Except Isla had already seen it. She stepped inside. The foyer had been painted over. The warm yellows were now muted greys. The worn wood floor had been stripped and replaced with polished tile. All of Cyril's touches had been erased, except for one. Above the stairway banister, tucked near the old crown moulding, was the smallest detail Alina had missed. A hand-carved wooden tile with the initials SN burned gently into the corner. Isla ran her fingers over it. Still here, still hers. She walked through each room. The library was gone, turned into an extension of the kitchen. The garden had been paved over, the dining room table replaced, but the bones of the house hadn't changed. The way the light moved across the floor at 3 p.m., the smell of the hallway closet that still held one of Cyril's scarves, forgotten. The creak in the back hallway near the laundry room where Isla had once, hidden as a child, listening to her mother hum while folding clothes. No one could sell that. Not with a price tag, not with a contract, and not without her saying yes. She wouldn't. She'd never say yes. Later that night, she met Corvin in the city. They sat in his penthouse office, overlooking the skyline. He'd cleared the space for her, dimmed the lights, turned off his phone. No distractions. I found the last note, she said. He looked up. At the bookstore, she continued. The owner said you left it, years ago. He waited. I never found it. Until now. Do you still have it? She nodded and handed it to him. He read it slowly, then looked at her. I meant every word. She leaned against the edge of his desk. Silence passed between them like a shared breath. Then she said it, calm but certain. She's trying to sell the house. I figured, I want to stop it. Legally, permanently. You can. You will. I need your help. You have it. There was no need to elaborate. He didn't offer lawyers or contacts or money. He offered presence. He offered belief. And right now, that was more valuable than anything else. The next morning, Isla filed an injunction at the county court to freeze any transfer of ownership on the Norrin property. Corvin's team assisted, but she signed every document herself. Her signature didn't shake. In the courtroom lobby, a reporter recognized her. You're the one he left the Vel girl for, right? Isla didn't pause. She turned, looked the woman in the eye and said, he didn't leave anyone. He just returned to the truth. No smirk, no bite, just fact. Tara sat in her new condo, scrolling through comments on her latest video. The likes were still there, the compliments, but they felt hollow. She rewatched the clip Isla had been tagged in the day before, an impromptu moment of Isla at a community event, holding a little girl's hand as she walked her through a storytelling workshop. The comments weren't about makeup or dresses or yacht trips. They were about presence. Words like warm, quiet power, grace, and earned. Tara hated how badly she wanted to feel that. Not the fame. The substance. She turned her phone over and sat in silence. For the first time, wondering what her life might have looked like if her mother had taught her to be real instead of perfect. Corvin showed up at Isla's apartment that night with takeout and no shoes. She opened the door, raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know we were past the shoe rule," she said. "I wasn't sure I'd be allowed in if I knocked." She stepped aside without a word. He walked in, handed her the food, and took a seat on her couch like he'd always belonged there. "I have something for you," he said after dinner. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. She opened it. A photo of her mother, one she'd never seen. Cyril laughing, in a park, head thrown back. Corvin standing beside her with flour on his shirt. "I found it last week," he said. "Didn't know if it was the right time." "It is." She touched the image gently. She never looked happier. "I didn't deserve her," he said. "You didn't forget her." He met her eyes. "No, and I won't forget you either." She didn't need more, because sometimes remembering is the purest form of love. If you believe quiet strength holds more power than noise, this is your moment to stand with Isla. Tap the like button if you've ever been overlooked but refused to disappear. Comment below, what's one truth you're reclaiming for yourself? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded they don't have to raise their voice to rise. And if you're here for stories where the underdog walks in calm and walks out with everything, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories right now. Isla sat on her apartment floor, a single notebook opened across her knees. It was Cyril's handwriting again, half legible in places, notes layered, over old to-do lists, flower sketches, and half-finished business ideas. But in between those, something clearer had been left behind. A pattern, a trail, each date, each name, each tiny observation that meant nothing on its own, until Isla lined them up in order. Alina had been preparing to replace her long before Cyril's death. It started small. A cancelled lunch, a disagreement about a partnership, then the subtle rumors. A letter Cyril mentioned, but never received. Phone calls that stopped getting returned. Friends who distanced themselves without explanation. Cyril had written them all down. Not like a victim, like a woman documenting what she sensed but couldn't yet prove. On the final page of the notebook, Cyril had drawn a single box around 5 words. If she touches the will, nothing more. No follow-up sentence, no answer, just those words. Isla ran her thumb over them slowly and whispered, "You knew." Corvin arrived at her door later that morning. She hadn't called, but he came anyway. He stood in the hallway, holding 2 coffees and a quiet expression that said he was ready, whatever she needed. "You knew I'd need this," she said, taking one. "I felt it." They sat at the small table in her kitchen. She handed him the notebook. He read in silence, then asked, "Are you ready to use this?" Isla didn't answer immediately. Then, "Only if I need to." He looked at her closely. "You still don't want revenge. I want what belongs to her restored. And if Alina won't back down." Isla folded the notebook closed. "Then she'll leave with everything she brought into the house. Nothing more." Back at the estate, Alina stood at the edge of the dining room. The realtors had called that morning. The house wasn't moving. Buyers were hesitant. Rumors were spreading. The unsettled family dispute had made its way into private listings and whispered networks. She wasn't losing a sale. She was losing her illusion. Her husband had left 2 days earlier, claiming he was visiting a friend upstate. But she knew he hadn't taken his suitcase. He had taken his wedding band. And Tara? Still posting online, still chasing validation, but not calling, not answering, not thanking her. Alina had built everything, controlled every move, calculated every risk, and somehow, Isla had undone her entire performance with silence, with presence, with truth. Isla stood outside the courthouse just after noon. She had one folder in her hand and her mother's locket under her sweater. Inside the folder, proof, the real will, the journal. 3 signed witness statements from Sorel's former colleagues, all written years ago, all prepared in case something ever happened. She hadn't filed them yet. She was giving Alina a choice. There would be no press release, no shouting match, just one meeting, one final warning. They met at the same law firm where Alina had tried to dismiss the original will. This time, Isla didn't come alone. Corvin walked in with her, not as a protector, not as a shield, just as proof that she wasn't alone anymore. Alina sat across the table in another sharp dress, a new necklace, and a colder expression than usual, but her eyes flickered when she saw the folder. "Trying again?" she said flatly. "No," Isla said. "This is the last time." Alina raised a brow. "You think you can corner me?" "I'm not cornering you. I'm giving you a chance to walk out with whatever dignity you haven't traded." Alina didn't flinch. "And if I don't?" Isla placed the folder on the table. "I file this." The room went quiet. Alina stared at her. "You think anyone cares what Sarah wanted? That woman made herself small. I built something. You built it on lies. No one will remember your mother." "I don't need the world to remember her," Isla said calmly. "I only need the truth to outlive you." Alina froze, because that, more than any threat, was what she feared. Legacy. Cyril had left one without money, titles, or noise, and Isla had become it. Outside, Isla didn't speak until they reached the car. Corvin opened the door for her. She paused before getting in. "She's going to back down." He nodded. "I know. She'll hate it. She'll never forget it." Isla looked at him. "Do you think my mother would have been proud of how I handled this?" He didn't hesitate. "I think she left you everything she couldn't say out loud, and I think you said it exactly the way she hoped you would." She got in. This time, not as someone walking away from pain, but as someone driving toward peace. Alina sat alone in the parlor that night. No wine, no music, no audience, just her, and the silence she had never learned to sit with. She had thought control came from being the loudest, from appearing the most composed, from taking what someone else built and calling it her own. But Isla hadn't raised her voice once, and yet the house no longer felt like hers. Not because of documents, because of presence. Isla had returned with nothing flashy, no designer gowns, no public relations campaign, no scathing interviews. She came back with truth, and the truth had made everything shake. Across town, Isla stood in front of her bathroom mirror, tying her hair back slowly. Her hands weren't shaking tonight. She wasn't thinking about what had been taken anymore. She was thinking about what she was ready to build. She opened her mother's old locket. The initials S+C still shimmered inside, Cyril and Corvin. A love that had almost been. A story that was interrupted, not erased. And now, something new, something that carried their memory, but wasn't trapped by it. She placed the locket around her neck, not as protection, as inheritance, not to file it, to register the final amendment. The house would go into a living trust in Cyril's name, protected from resale, passed on directly to Isla. No press involved, no family signatures needed. She signed the final document herself. When the clerk asked, "Do you want this public?" Isla shook her head. "No. This isn't a headline. It's a home." Corvin met her outside, leaning against the car. "You did it," he said simply. "I kept her name safe." He looked at her like he could see all the years she had carried quietly, the girl who had once stayed small to survive, now standing taller without raising her voice. "You look lighter," he said. "I feel ready. Ready for what? For what comes next. On my terms." He smiled. "Then let's go slow." She reached for his hand. "Let's go steady." Tara watched the notification roll in. The house listing had been pulled. The private sale was dead, and so was the illusion. She set the phone down gently, then opened a draft message to Isla. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed, "You didn't take anything from me, you just finally stood up. I was never taught how to do that. I'm still learning." She didn't hit send, not yet, but she didn't delete it either. Maybe some things take time, even honesty. Back at the estate, Alina walked room by room, pausing in the places she had once renovated. All her touches now felt hollow. Nothing lasted. Not the marble countertops, not the designer drapes, not the curated perfection, but the scarf hanging by the back door. Cyril's, still there, still real. Alina sat down on the staircase. For the first time she wondered if maybe the woman she tried to erase had been stronger all along. Because Cyril never needed to win publicly. She had left a daughter who didn't scream, who didn't crumble, who simply waited for the right time, and walked back in. Isla and Corvin stood together on the porch of the Norrin house that evening. He leaned on the railing while she unlocked the front door. Inside, it was still cold, still quiet, but it was hers now. Not because a court gave it back, because truth did. "You want to change anything?" Corvin asked, looking around. She walked slowly through the living room, pausing by the fireplace. Just the color on the walls, not tearing it all down. She looked at him. "No, some things don't need to be replaced, just restored." He nodded. "And what about us?" She stepped closer. "That's not being replaced either." He took her hand, held it. No promises, no declarations. Just a shared moment between two people who had walked through loss, silence, and truth, and come out ready to build, not perform. Later that night, Isla placed her mother's journal on the fireplace mantel. Not to revisit, to honor, because it wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about standing in the future without shame, and that's exactly what she was doing. The story was supposed to fade by now. That's what Alina had counted on. That the world would get bored, that Isla would stop pushing, that Corvin would disappear back into boardrooms and billion-dollar transactions. But nothing faded. Not when it came from truth, and not when the one they tried to erase walked back into the center with calm steps and a full name behind her. Isla Norrin wasn't trending. She was remembered. And that held more weight than popularity ever could. Corvin stood inside Aldrich Maritime's boardroom that morning, addressing 10 of the most powerful voices in global shipping. And when the meeting ended, he didn't call on his assistant. He called Isla. "Is this too soon?" he asked, opening the door for her. She stepped in slowly, surveying the space. "I thought you wanted to keep your world separate." "I did," he said. "But maybe it's time they learn how I move forward." Isla sat quietly, pulling a leather folder from her bag. Inside, she'd prepared notes for the Aldrich Foundation's new community housing initiative, her first collaboration with Corvin's global network. Not as a favor, not as a romance, as a partner. Across the table, the board didn't quite know how to read her. That made her smile inside, because being unreadable was power, especially when you had something solid to say. She waited until the room was fully quiet. Then she spoke. Calm, clear, and unshaken. Alina received the photo from a contact that afternoon. Isla, at the boardroom table, sitting beside Corvin. Her posture was calm, her presence undeniable. Alina dropped the photo into the trash folder on her phone, but her hand lingered above the screen for a second too long, because in that moment she realized she was watching someone become everything she had tried to impersonate, and Isla had done it without needing to destroy anyone. That was the part that stung most, because Alina had spent decades proving herself, loudly. Isla had done it by simply showing up. That evening, Isla walked into the house, the Norrin house, with grocery bags in hand and her hair pulled back in a loose tie. The room smelled like cinnamon again. She had lit the same candles her mother used to burn, replaced the sterile greys with warm tones, took down the updates and put back the soul. She wasn't trying to return it to the past. She was anchoring it in love. Corvin joined her on the back porch just after sunset. He brought 2 mugs of tea and nothing else. "Tell me something real," he said, handing her a cup. She took a sip, then looked at the garden. "I thought I had to stay small to survive." He waited. "But I realized I don't have to shrink to fit what's left. I can rebuild until it fits me." His shoulders softened. "You're not rebuilding alone." She met his eyes. I'm not rushing this, he smiled. I'm not asking you to. They sat there, shoulder to shoulder, as the sky deepened. No need for declarations. Some bonds speak loudest in quiet. Meanwhile, in a hotel downtown, Tara refreshed her feed again. Nothing. No new features. No brand inquiries. She'd been posting daily. But the world had shifted, and she hadn't shifted with it. She stared at a message she still hadn't sent. The one to Isla. Her thumb hovered again. She added 4 new words, if I could undo it. Still, she didn't send it. Not because she didn't mean it, but because maybe, this time, she needed to listen first. Back at the Norrin house, Isla stepped into her mother's old workroom. She hadn't opened it in years. The shelves were still full of fabric samples, mood boards, hand-drawn, designs and rolls of ideas Sorrel never had the chance to bring to life. Isla ran her hand over a sketch. It was a jacket, structured but soft, the kind her mother used to wear in the fall. Pinned beneath the paper was a note. For Isla. When she's ready to wear something that reminds her she's already enough. She smiled, closed her eyes, let it sit. Then she rolled up the sketch, folded it gently, and carried it to her room. She wasn't going to leave the past behind. She was going to wear it as proof that she came from strength. That weekend, Isla opened the Norrin house to people who had once been pushed out. Her mother's friends. The ones Alina had quietly uninvited from birthdays, shut out of holidays, or called unnecessary distractions during Sorrel's final year. Isla didn't announce the gathering on social media. She handwrote the invitations. No branding, no hashtags, just, you were part of what made her home feel full. You're welcome back. By noon, the house was filled with the sound of real laughter. Warm greetings, old stories, half-forgotten recipes, and the quiet echo of something sacred being restored. Corvin arrived just after lunch. He didn't make an entrance. He helped an elderly man carry in a tray of baked bread and then stood in the kitchen drying dishes like he'd always belonged there. Someone whispered, "Is that Corvin Aldrich?" Another guest replied, "He's not the most powerful person in this house today." Everyone looked toward Isla, standing at the doorway of her mother's old studio, smiling without having to perform. Alina found out through a florist. One of Cyril's old friends had placed a massive same-day delivery to the Norrin address. The note read, "She would have loved today. Thank you for remembering her." Alina stared at the receipt, then at her reflection. There was no lipstick bright enough to fix what she'd lost, no press release to rewrite legacy, and no daughter who'd stand beside her without asking, why? Because the house that was once hers by paper had returned to its rightful owner through memory. Not law, not threats, but dignity. That night, Isla sat on the floor in her old bedroom. The walls had been painted a soft cream. The bookshelf was full again, not with bestsellers or curated collections, but with her mother's favorites, the ones with bent spines and scribbled notes in the margins. She pulled out one and opened it to a page marked with a fabric swatch. Inside, a quote was underlined in faded ink. "What's built quietly tends to last the longest." Isla rested the book against her knees. She had never aimed to be loud. She only ever wanted to be real. And now, she was both. Downstairs, Corvin was helping a few guests to their cars. He had already made tea for 3 older women who refused to leave without hugging Isla. He'd brought in folding chairs from the garage, helped relight the kitchen pilot when the stove flickered out. When Isla came down, the house was mostly quiet again, just the scent of cardamom and memories left behind. He looked up when he saw her. "You were glowing today," he said. She smiled. "I wasn't performing." "Exactly." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out something small, a pendant, the same S+C design from the locket, but engraved beneath, in smaller letters, IN. She stared at it, then looked up. "I'm not my mother. I know. I don't want to be remembered only through her." "You won't." He stepped closer. "You'll be remembered because you stood when no one expected you to." She nodded, slowly, and took the pendant in her hand. Elsewhere in the city, Tara sat in a low-lit lounge, surrounded by people who smiled too wide and listened too little. She scrolled through photos from the day, not paparazzi shots, just ones posted by guests, candids of Isla holding hands with a child, of her embracing an old neighbor, of Corvin carrying folding chairs like a normal man. And then, one photo of Isla standing at the garden gate, looking up at the sky with her mother's scarf draped over her shoulders. Tara clicked into the image, zoomed in, and for the first time, her own face reflected back in the phone screen didn't feel like it belonged. She closed the app and opened her notes. Typed, "I used to think legacy was a last name, but today I saw it in someone's quiet." She hit save, still not ready to send, but closer. At midnight, Isla stood barefoot on the porch. The house behind her was quiet, but the stars above felt like they were watching. Corvin stepped out behind her. He didn't say anything at first. Then, "You never asked me why I stayed away for so long after Cyril passed." She looked at him. "You didn't owe me that. I owe you truth." She waited. He said, "I thought I was honoring her by staying gone, that I'd ruined too much, and then I saw you again, and I realized I was just afraid you'd remind me of what I lost. And did I? No. You reminded me there was still something worth staying for." She stepped closer. Didn't touch him, but she didn't need to. She was already felt. The attic hadn't been touched in years. Not since Cyril passed. Isla had avoided it, not out of fear, but because the rest of the house had always been enough to carry the memories. The scent of her mother's perfume still lingered faintly in the fabric drawers. The outline of her handwriting still lived on notes slipped between books. But the attic, that was where her mother kept the things not meant for everyday eyes. Old projects, locked boxes, unfinished dreams, and maybe something more. That morning, after coffee and a quiet walk with Corvin, Isla pulled down the attic ladder. Dust fell from the frame like soft snow. The air inside smelled of cedar, aged paper, and time. She climbed carefully. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of fear, because of reverence. The attic was still. Golden light from a single window caught the edges of old trunks and canvas-covered dress forms. There, in the far corner, was the wooden chest her mother used to keep locked. Isla had asked once what was inside. Cyril had smiled and said, "Only what needs to wait." Now, the wait was over. Isla knelt before the chest. The key around her neck, the one hidden behind the photo frame all those years, slid into the lock easily. Click. The lid opened. Inside were three things: a red envelope, a smaller box, leather-bound, and a sketchbook. She opened the envelope first. "My Isla, if you're here, I trust that life didn't break you. Maybe it tried, maybe it bent you, but if you're reading this, you came back anyway. This chest isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. I left things behind that I wasn't strong enough to say. You are stronger than me, but quieter too. That's your gift. And your weapon. The box inside holds something your father never knew about, a share in a company I helped start. I never cashed out. I left it untouched because I didn't want anyone to say I built nothing. Now it's yours. Use it how you see fit. The sketchbook is unfinished, but maybe you'll know how to finish it. Or maybe you'll just hold it and remember, I was never planning to disappear. I just didn't want to stay where I wasn't respected. Give yourself what I never gave myself. A full life. A room where your name doesn't have to compete to matter. I love you. Always did. Even in silence. Mom." Isla set the letter down slowly, then opened the box. Inside was a set of shares, modest but valuable, in a sustainable textile company. Cyril's name was still on the records, untouched, unclaimed. Isla smiled. Of course her mother had left something unspoken. She'd built her life like that, quietly solid. Now it was Isla's, and this time she wouldn't keep it in the dark. Later that day, Isla sat across from Corvin in the garden, the sketchbook in her lap. She opened it. Each page was filled with designs, not for red carpets or corporate offices, but for women like her mother, and, like Isla, clothes with dignity, soft armor. I used to think she only designed to cope, Isla said, flipping a page. But she was building something, preparing for something she knew might never arrive. Corvin leaned in. She was building for you. I think she was building for us both. She ran her hand down the final blank page, then closed the book. I want to finish it. He nodded. Tell me what you need. She looked at him. No hesitation, just space, and someone who won't ask me to be louder than I am. I can do that. That night, she stood in her mother's old studio. The room was warm again. She laid out the sketchbook, opened her laptop, and drafted her first email to the textile company Sorel had invested in years ago. She introduced herself not as the daughter of, but as Isla Norin, an heir, a founder's daughter, a quiet woman with plans. The textile company replied the next morning, polite, surprised, respectful. They confirmed the shares were still valid. No one had ever touched them. The founder, Isla's mother, had been one of the quiet seed investors, a small stake, but foundational, back when it was nothing more than a 3-person operation in a Brooklyn basement. Now, it was a nationally recognized sustainable label, and they wanted to meet. Isla sat with the email for a while, reading the line twice. We'd be honored to speak with you and hear your mother's vision, if you'd be willing to share it. She looked at the open sketchbook across her table and smiled. She didn't rush into the meeting. She prepared like her mother had taught her, with care, with purpose, no flash, no gimmicks. She printed copies of the designs, not digitized mock-ups, real pages, just like her mother had drawn them. She added her own notes to the margins, adjustments, updates, touches of her own life, layered into the patterns. Each design was a quiet rebellion, not for status, for restoration. She didn't want a deal. She wanted a collaboration, a bridge between what Sorel had started and what she was ready to carry forward. The company was housed in a renovated loft in the Flatiron district. Isla walked in wearing one of her mother's unfinished pieces, a cropped linen jacket she had tailored herself. Simple, intentional. She was met by a woman named Ray, the current head of creative operations. Ray offered no fake smile, no startup buzzwords, just an outstretched hand and a quiet, "We've heard a lot about your mother." She was years ahead of the market. Isla sat down across from the boardroom table, opened the sketchbook. This is what she didn't get to finish. Ray leaned forward, flipping each page slowly. By the 5th page, the energy shifted. No one interrupted. By the 10th, one of the advisors stood to take photos, quietly, respectfully. When Isla finally closed the book, Ray asked one question. Do you want to license the designs, or build something in her name? Isla didn't hesitate. I want to build something in mine. Ray nodded. Good. Because we need that now more than ever. Corvin was waiting outside when she stepped into the sunlight. He didn't ask how it went. He just watched her face. She didn't smile, but he saw the light in her eyes. Well? He finally asked. They're not doing me a favor, she said softly. They're inviting me in. He opened the car door for her. You look ready. I am. She paused before getting in. This isn't just about fashion. I know. It's about taking up space. He stepped closer. You don't need permission for that anymore. She looked up at him. I never did. That weekend, she returned to the Norin house with fabric in her arms and a mood board under one arm. She moved her mother's dress forms back into place, set the sketchbook on the sewing table, and got to work. Corvin visited but never hovered. He brought tea, picked up deliveries, stepped in only when she asked. Sometimes he read nearby. Sometimes he sat in silence. She never had to explain herself to him, and that was what made her fall for him deeper than she expected. Not because he fixed things, because he didn't expect her to be less. Alina received the first announcement from a fashion blog that Sunday. New silent line. Co-founder Isla Norin revives legacy with sustainable. Collaboration rooted in generational strength and timeless design. There was no mention of Sorel, no mention of Corvin, Just Isla, standing in front of the Norrin house, wearing the jacket her mother designed, with her name printed in bold under the headline. Alina read it twice, then closed the browser. She couldn't unsee what had happened. She hadn't just lost control. She had been outlived by the truth, and the woman she once called forgettable had just rewritten the narrative. Without shouting, without revenge, with presence. That night, Isla walked through the garden her mother once kept. She carried a small journal, not Cyril's, her own. She wrote 3 sentences. I didn't need to burn it all down. I only needed to step into what was already mine. Quiet doesn't mean weak, it means certain. She closed the book, then looked up at the stars. There was no applause, no audience, just peace, and that was louder than anything Alina ever built. The night was soft. No wind, no rain, just stillness. Isla stepped out of the studio, wiped her hands on the side of her linen pants, and looked across the back garden where the porch light lit the edge of the lawn. Corvin was there, waiting, not in a rush, just present. She didn't rush either. She sat beside him on the stairs, their knees almost touching, the scent of wood and thread and quiet work lingering in her hair. He passed her a cup of tea. You've been at it for hours. I lost track of time. I watched the sun move through that window. She smiled lightly. That's how I know I'm doing the right thing. I forget the clock exists. He looked at her, steady. You're not the same woman who walked into that engagement party. She met his eyes. Neither are you. He nodded once, slowly. But I think we're better versions now. She didn't disagree. She didn't need to. Inside the studio, the first prototype hung on the dress form. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. A structured jacket, natural fabric, hand-sewn seams, an echo of Cyril's original pattern, with Isla's subtle revisions layered in. It looked like something a woman could walk into a boardroom wearing, or a bookstore. It looked like resilience you could wear. They ate dinner at the kitchen island. Leftovers, mismatched plates. Corvin rolled up his sleeves, washed dishes by hand. She dried. It wasn't romantic. It was steady, and maybe that's what she'd been missing all along. Not noise, not chaos. Steadiness, the kind of quiet that didn't ask her to shrink or shout. Just exist. Later, they sat on the couch, a candle burning low behind them. No TV, no playlist. He asked, "Do you think she would have liked me?" Isla didn't answer right away. Then, "I think she would have liked the way you look at me." And, "How's that?" "Like I'm not required to be anyone else." He leaned back. "I used to chase after things that looked perfect. Tara looked perfect on paper. Alina sounded perfect in public. But you..." She raised an eyebrow. "You're the only person I've met who makes peace feel more powerful than performance." She didn't blush. She just nodded. Because that felt true. Tara posted a photo the next morning. No filter, no product tags, no caption. Just her. Hair pulled back. Face clean. Underneath, comments poured in. "You look real. This is the first time I've actually seen you. Whatever you're doing, don't stop." She stared at them for a long time, then finally opened the message to Isla she drafted weeks ago. Typed one more line. "I hope you know you made space for more than just yourself." She pressed send. Isla saw the message just before her meeting with Ray and the textile team. She read it twice, didn't respond right away, not because she didn't forgive her, but because forgiveness didn't always need words. Sometimes it was just choosing not to carry bitterness into the next room. She slid the phone into her bag, picked up her mother's sketchbook, and walked into a meeting as herself. No revenge, no shadow, just presence. Later that day, Corvin drove her to the river. They didn't talk much during the drive, but when they got out, he opened the back seat and pulled out a blanket and a box. Inside the box, 2 mugs, a thermos of tea, and a handwritten note. He handed it to her. She opened it. "This isn't a proposal. This is a pause. A space for you to decide how you want to write the rest. With me. If you choose to." She folded the note, slid it into her coat. "I've never been good at deciding out loud," she said. "I know. But I don't want to walk into this quietly just because that's comfortable." "I don't want comfort," he said. "I want truth." She smiled. "Then I guess we're starting something." He sat beside her on the grass. They poured tea, watched the river move like time. No vows, no labels, just two people who'd stopped pretending they had to be louder to be seen. The fall collection didn't drop with a runway show, no red carpet, no celebrities, just a quiet release through a simple newsletter and a soft launch video filmed in the Norin studio. No models, just Isla, buttoning a jacket, folding fabric, looking directly into the camera without performance. Ray had advised against it. The marketing team preferred polished, but Isla said, "I want people to wear these because they feel seen, not because they're trying to be." When the collection went live, the website traffic doubled within 2 hours, not because of trend, because of truth. Corvin watched the launch video from his phone while standing on the porch. He replayed the last 5 seconds twice, where Isla smiled but didn't say a word, just held the sketchbook, pressed it gently to her chest, and faded out. He understood the power of statements, but hers was presence. She didn't have to speak. She already said enough. Tara saw the video too. She shared it quietly, no caption, just reposted the link, then muted her notifications. She didn't need to explain to anyone why it mattered. Some things you learn after the spotlight fades. Isla sat with Ray and the textile team 2 days later reviewing the numbers. "This isn't normal," one of the directors said. "You've created something people are emotionally responding to." Isla nodded. "Because it's not about dressing up. It's about..." She met his gaze. Memory, dignity, legacy. The room fell quiet. Someone finally whispered, "You're building something more than a brand." She nodded once. "I'm restoring one." That night, Corvin made dinner at the Norin house. Pasta, nothing fancy. Isla stood by the window, watching him stir. "Do you realize," she said, "this is the first time this kitchen has felt like a home again." He turned, smiling softly. "It's the first time it's had peace again." They ate at the table. No candles, no playlist, just laughter. He reached for her hand midway through the meal, not for show, just to say, "I'm here," and she let him hold it. Not for security, just to say, "I know." After dinner, she pulled out an old box from her mother's studio and opened it on the living room rug. Inside were old receipts, handwritten tags, and a folded piece of paper labeled "Future Ideas." She opened it. Tears built behind her eyes. Her mother had written a list of items: soft armor. For the woman rebuilding, for the one reclaiming, for the quiet ones not asking for a stage, just space. She handed it to Corvin. He read it, looked at her. "You're her future idea." She nodded. "And now I get to write mine." He kissed her that night. Not rushed, not expected. It started slow, just a breath near her shoulder, then his lips gently brushing hers. She didn't pull away. When he touched her jaw, she leaned into him. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't about making up for lost time. It was about arriving, fully, at a place neither of them thought they'd be again. She rested her forehead against his after. "I'm not afraid anymore." He whispered, "Of what?" "Of being loved without having to earn it." He held her tighter. "You never had to earn it. You just had to stop hiding from it." They stayed on the couch for a while, her head on his chest, his arm around her. The kind of closeness that didn't need approval or permission, just peace. And for Isla Norin, that was the first real love she ever felt. One that never needed to be loud, only true. The gala invite came wrapped in navy silk ribbon. It arrived at Norin's headquarters, addressed only to the woman who remembered. No sender name, no return address. But Isla knew. Not because of the handwriting, because of the ribbon. It matched the one from that night. The night she stood across from Kaelin Dawn and gave him back his lie, folded into a thank you note. Corvin raised a brow as she held it. "You don't have to go." She looked down at the envelope again. Her thumb brushed over the edge. I do. Ray didn't ask questions when Isla mentioned it. She simply said, "You'll wear Norrin, right?" Isla gave her a knowing smile. "I'm wearing her." The next 3 days were quiet, intentional, grounded. She didn't choose diamonds or volume. She chose a soft white suit from her mother's final sketch, unreleased, unfinished, and unapproved. Isla completed it in silence, stitching the final cuff herself at the work table, using thread the exact shade of her mother's favorite tea. The morning of the gala, she stood before the mirror in the Norrin house and didn't see revenge. She saw remembrance. Corvin drove her to the venue. He didn't offer advice. He didn't ask if she needed anything. He just held her hand at every red light. "Thank you," she whispered as they pulled up to the gate. He kissed the back of her hand. "For what?" "For not needing to speak for me. You never needed anyone to speak for you." She smiled. "But it helps that the one beside me never tried." The venue was marble and mirrors, the kind of place where people performed power in every handshake, every laugh, every camera flash. When Isla stepped in, the room slowed, not stopped, not silenced, just adjusted, as if unsure how to categorize her presence. Not press, not decoration, not scandal. She was something else. And no one wanted to admit they'd forgotten her name. Kaylin Dawn stood across the room. His new partner was beside him, young, shiny, styled to impress. He smiled like he hadn't broken anything. But when Isla looked up, their eyes met. No words passed, only something quieter. The discomfort of a man realizing his shadow no longer mattered in her light. Ray had arranged for Isla to present one piece at the silent auction. Instead, Isla submitted a handwritten letter, one sheet, folded, sealed. On the table beside it, a plain white box. Inside, a scarf, light grey, minimal, nothing branded, nothing flashy. Just one line embroidered in the corner, this time, "I chose me." Whispers circled. Some guests laughed softly. Some said, "What is this?" Some said, "Who does she think she is?" But a woman in a midnight velvet dress walked to the table. She picked up the card. She read the line, and she wiped her eyes. She didn't ask who Isla was. She understood. Kaylin made his way to the exhibit table later. Ray blocked him gently. "She doesn't need anything from you." He smirked. "I just wanted to say congratulations." Ray's tone didn't shift. "She heard you loudest when you didn't say anything at all." He turned. And for the first time, Kaylin Dawn walked away without applause behind him. Back home that night, Isla sat at her mother's chair with her shoes off, suit still on, tea steeping nearby. Corvin walked in and placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of the winning bid for the scarf and letter. Anonymous. 6 figures. She raised a brow. He smiled. "Turns out, quiet dignity auctions higher than noise." She chuckled softly, then paused. "Do you think she would have been proud?" Corvin didn't answer right away. He stepped behind her, placed his hands on her shoulders. "She'd be proud you remembered who you were before the world forgot." She closed her eyes and smiled. Winter sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains at Norrin headquarters. Everything was quieter now, not empty, not sad, just whole. Isla stood in her mother's old design room. No photographers, no fabric piles, no mirrors, just sketches on the wall and a journal on the table, one her mother had kept for years. Isla had never opened it until today. The first page held a note. "To the woman you'll become." I already see her. She sat down slowly, read each page like she was meeting her mother again after a long separation. Her mother had written about Corvin, about Ray, about the battles she'd fought to stay visible in a world that hated quiet women with strong eyes. But mostly, she wrote about Isla, about raising a daughter who would never need permission to remember her own worth. By the time Isla reached the last page, tears blurred the ink. But she smiled. Later that day, Ray came into the room holding her phone. "You might want to see this," Ela took it. A post was going viral. It showed the scarf, the embroidered line, and the letter. Below it, a caption from a stranger. I didn't bid, but I remembered myself when I read her words. Tens of thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, no one tagging Norrin, no one tagging Ela, just people saying thank you. That was the legacy. Corvin walked in with 2 mugs. He paused when he saw the journal. You opened it. She nodded. I think she was waiting for me to be ready. He handed her the mug. She'd have loved this version of you. Ela looked up. This version is finally mine. Outside the studio window, snow started falling. Ray stood near the glass, voice low. I got a call from that network. Ela raised an eyebrow. They want you. A feature. Your story. Will I be able to tell it my way? They said, yes. Ela looked at the wall again. At her mother's final sketch. Then back to Ray. Then, I'm in. 1 week later, the world saw Ela Vell again. Not as the woman Kaylin Dawn denied, not as the scandal who wore silence like a shield, but as the woman who rewrote her mother's name into something permanent. When the interviewer asked her, what would you say to the woman you used to be? Ela answered without blinking. The segment aired during prime time. Kaylin watched it in his penthouse, alone, no one sitting beside him, no hands clapping, no headlines praising his charm. Just Ila's voice across the screen, calm and sure. The same woman he once called everything he wanted. And now, she was the woman he could never approach again. Not because she hated him, but because she no longer needed him to finish her story. Corvin met Ela backstage after the segment aired. The first thing he said was simple. You were real. She looked at him, tired but glowing. You stayed. I always would. I know. They didn't say anything for a long moment, until Ela reached into her pocket and handed him something. It was the Norrin pin, the one she never wore. She looked up at him. This doesn't belong to me alone anymore. They didn't toast. They didn't celebrate with noise. They walked home in the snow, holding hands, quietly, because sometimes the loudest triumph is peace. She wasn't the echo of a man's betrayal anymore. She was the voice of her mother's legacy, and the future never saw her coming. If you believe quiet strength rewrites everything, if you've ever been overlooked, denied, or betrayed, let this story remind you. You don't need to scream to change the ending. You don't need to fight to prove you're enough. You only need to remember who you were, before they forgot. Subscribe now for more stories where dignity wins, legacies rise, and the underdog walks out on top. Tell us where you're watching from. And if this story found you at the right time, comment below. I'm writing my own legacy now. This is Mr. Charles Stories, where silence isn't weakness, it's power. We'll see you in the next one.